This is John, and today we're sitting down with Laura Fetterbush, and people who might be like one of our regular viewers will notice that she's the harp player, and today she's without her harp, and we're talking about a different subject matter, and I'm surprised that Laura went into this because I mean you never put like this kind of two and two together and come up with your interests your interests are very varied to say the least. Of course, above you we have the title of your book, and you're having a book that's being released through Amazon, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's in paperback and also on Kindle.
And it's first of all I've got to ask you. It's like it's the flat Earth meets Tesla, a primer impaired inverted world's cosmology, and this is kind of like a kind of controversial subject in the scientific world because a lot of scientists and physicists and all this would be. This is like something they like to aim at, lampoon, and you actually are an advocate of a kind of a controversial figure. I mean, a theory. So why don't we go into what started you to think this way, and why do you think this might be the correct way of looking at the world?
Okay, well, I think it's actually generous of you to say that it's controversial. Probably there's actually no controversy in science about it right now. They would just universally dismiss it as crackpot. I just want to be upfront about that. But nonetheless, I mean, this is what I believe. And there are other people. See, that's one of the things about the computer age. You can get exposed to all kinds of viewpoints, and sometimes that might be a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. But nonetheless, I sort of like to look up alternative theories of how things work. Alternative theories about our universe and the planets. So that's what got me started on this. Things about like Planet X. Some people have conspiracy theories about that, and by getting into things like that, I got exposed to. I came upon one video of some guy who was actually a physicist, but he had he came up with physics reasons why to say that the Earth was motionless and wasn't spinning and wasn't even moving. And, that was kind of eye-opening to me that anyone would actually believe that. There's the Flat Earth Society, but they don't go into a lot of physical reasons why they believe what they believe. But this guy actually had logical reasons. Like the mass of objects at the equator would be significantly different from the mass of objects, at the North or South Pole, and, things like that. But by sort of going along those lines, that sort of got me. Eventually got into flat Earth. This guy his name was Powell Kalasa. He was not a flat earther. He was just into geocentricity, which is believing that the Earth is the center of the universe. But they still believe the Earth is round. But then there are other people who come up with reasons to believe in the flat Earth, such as the objects in the distance. No matter how far away you are from something, it remains vertical. It doesn't look like it's tilted over, the farther away you get from it. Or, if you watch a balloon disappear in the distance, it doesn't start, tilting away the farther it goes. And, and basically there's no real proof that the Earth is round. I mean, apart from the, if you believe NASA or, the photos that they take, then you would say that that's proof. But apart from the man-made photographs and videos, there is no proof from our natural world that the Earth is round. So
that is controversial because I mean it's like we all we grew up in the I'm in my 50s, 51 to be exact, and I grew up seeing the images from space. We saw the astronauts walking on the moon, and there's a lot of people out there who want to discredit the account that we actually made it to the moon, and they say it was on a stage. And but we have this tendency to see that object we call Earth floating there, and it looks circular to us, round. But then again, to be honest, science is always saying that science, the nature of science, is always open to change and amendment, or actually totally abandoning a field. Not field, but abandoning that one held theory for another one. As one comes around that's better suited, better explains things. And that's the nature of science. And so it is kind of it's an interesting thing because you're bringing this up because it, largely would be ridiculed by the mainstream physics and the astrophysicists and all those people in those disciplines. But I think it's intriguing that you've actually done a lot of this research and you took time to write a book. Now, how long did it take you to write the book?
Well, the book itself only a few days, with the research leading up to it, I think a couple of years. And Oh, another thing, just to support the flat Earth thing, the reason people believe the Earth is round, it actually stems from, I think you and I have discussed this, from ancient ancient mysticism, like ancient Indian mysticism, like Zoroastrianism and Hinduism. They worshipped the sun. They had to put the sun at the center of things, and this sort of occult figure, Hermes Trismegistus, was also one of the people who believed in he had some statement that the sun was at the center, and the people like Sir Isaac Newton and Copernicus and others were influenced by that line of thinking. They weren't purely being scientific and objective. They were influenced by this kind of occult mysticism, and that's the roots of our modern astronomy. And it's hard for us to picture any other way of looking at the sky or the universe than the way that we've been taught. It seems so natural to us, but it actually stems out of mysticism. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. You got some drawings that you've done yourself, and if you want to see if we can show one, I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit on the camera here.
Okay. This is apart from the flat Earth thing, I actually came up with a theory which is actually different from what you'll see any other flat Earth people or anyone else in the world, as far as I know, having this theory. This is that's what I wrote the book about. It's called Inverted Worlds Cosmology. Paired inverted worlds cosmology, and so let me talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah, see, I think we might be able to zoom in on and get that. Okay. Yeah, that actually shows it pretty decently. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is my viewpoint of what I think that our cosmos actually looks like, and it's actually incredibly small, like compared to the scale we're used to thinking of things on. We're used. My viewpoint is our entire cosmos is, is like only like several thousand miles across, perhaps. But okay, this house is not to scale, and the sun and moon aren't to scale. But I believe that there is actually a pair of flat Earths, like sort of like pancakes, stacked on top of each other, probably held together by some. They're probably connected in some way, but they're basically stacked on top of each other. There's a sun and a moon. Okay, this is us and this is them, and they're upside down from us. They're not the mirror image of us. Like there's not, Laurel and John. There's not like an anti-Laurel and an anti-John down there. It's nothing goofy like that. It's just another world with other people. And they're sort of upside down from us. We have a sun and the moon. They have a sun and the moon. So. Yeah, and just to give the sideways, this is sort of a side view of that, it's flat, except that this would be sort of connected, probably the molten lava or something in the middle in between. And okay, my view is that this, we're used to thinking of the sun as this big sort of gassy, this big ball of fire, and the moon is just as some kind of little rock floating around that just happened to get, the craters are just like from maybe asteroids hitting it, and it's just sort of this random rock, and just very natural, these are just like natural things out there. But the way I see it is the cosmos is sort of more like a machine. We're not used to thinking of our cosmos like a machine. And I don't think that the sun and moon are actually the way we've been led to believe at all. I think the sun is a transmitter and the moon is a receiver. And our sun transmits scalar waves. That's a Tesla idea. The idea of the inventor Nikola Tesla had the concept of scalar waves. So our sun transmits scalar waves to the moon on the other side of the other flat Earth. And their sun, I said they have a sun and moon too. Their sun is also a transmitter, and it transmits scalar waves to our moon. And so the suns are actually transmitters, and the moons are actually receivers. And if you look at your phone, the receiver in your telephone, we have different kinds of phones now, but they still have holes in them where the sound goes into. So, like this microphone has holes in it. So the craters that we see in the moon are actually the holes that are receiving the scalar waves from the sun, but not from our sun, from the sun on the other side of the flat Earth. And by transmitting these scalar waves, it creates it creates a stationary wave. And you think of this sort of like an invisible leash or an invisible bungee cord. And our sun is paired on one end of the leash to their moon, and their sun is paired on one end of another leash to our moon. So, it probably sounds a little bit strange, but
Yeah, it does sound strange but I mean, there's some things that are common, like in parallel to what the conception of what we're taught. The sun is actually they say the sun is the reason why. I think it's the sun is the reason why we have gravity, isn't it? Because our position away from it is, and also they say if we were closer, would be, we'd be actually be too heated up. So,
right.
Gas, we couldn't exist. So I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of variables that just, I mean, it's not like extreme, but if you just actually change them slightly, life in the Earth would be in great peril or maybe totally non-existent.
Right.
So, I mean, there's some similarities in your explanation or your view of that, and there's some similarities between that and the more commonly held one that we're taught. I mean, and it's like, and I admit there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge about Earth science and about, cosmology and about astronomy and, astronomy, not astrology, astronomy, because, I mean, it just basically, there's so much information out there. I mean, the constellations are amazing because, that's something that's relatively, we have a lot of maps out there before, but there's still, I mean, it's like there's my knowledge of that basically would fit in a matchbook to use an analogy. I mean, and that's have plenty of room to spare because I mean, that's something that seems like there's on the History Channel. They're just talking about this the other day though. Ancient peoples would have actually more of a knowledge of how the planets lined up or the constellations were and the names of the constellations than the average person in the now 21st century. Because basically they weren't occupied with the things that we're occupied with as everyday people now. We have
Right.
TV, we have all these we have jobs, we got electric lights, and electric lights actually diminishes our capability in many areas to see the constellations. So I mean, your conception basically sounds offbeat, but I mean, there's some merit, I would say, to examining something like this. I mean, but it's just the purpose behind, people wondering, and your stuff definitely never try to pass yourself off as a expert, in these fields. It's something you've basically have an interest in. You see some flaws in the way it's being presented now, I think, isn't it? And it's
yeah, I guess I basically think that astronomy is completely wrong about a lot of things, and the reason they're wrong is because they're going on hypotheses that weren't developed through actual science. So the more they go along these hypotheses, like that the sun is at the center of something called the solar system, it sort of leads them to build up all these models based on false premises. And so we have this universe that's zillions and zillions of miles across, and they act as if that's the only possible way that we can explain our natural world. And I think it's actually the most complicated possible way to explain our natural world, to have to assume that there's this huge, infinitely large universe out there and that our world couldn't possibly exist without that. Like, that just seems like such an overly complex explanation and unnecessarily complex. And in science, there's a principle, it's called Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is most likely to be correct. And I think my theory about things is way simpler and doesn't have any extraneous parts like this, zillions and zillions of miles universe. That's just totally unnecessary as far as I'm concerned.
so I see a parallel between what you're saying and what my thoughts are of evolution. They say that, we develop from one single cell animals and, single cell, living organisms to the complexity that we are as humans. I mean, it's like there's so many missing, they say they mock when people say there's missing links, but if you got to show the transitory stages.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, basic analogy, I would say in the simplest form of, I can see the analogy is, when you're a kid and you're doing math problems like long division, or whatever. They want you to show your work. Well, these guys are accepting, and these guys are saying that we started from this real simple life form to this really complicated life form that we are now, and they can't really present any intermediary stages. They're not showing all their work.
Right.
They're not. I mean,
Exactly.
and so not, and I believe in evolution. I think change. I don't that, but like change does happen. And I mean, your theory is very actually kind of going back to the theory that a lot of people said that was prevalent before we were so-called quote unquote enlightened. But I mean, there's the assumptions that they built this system on that we're now being taught. You're right. It wasn't totally tested. It wasn't scientifically derived. It really wasn't. And it seems like there was a great deal of trying to make sure they got this model to work. They got this model in mind, and they're going to either rule out anything that challenges that, or basically, and they can't really explain it. Then they have a tendency to turn around and mock the person asking the questions or pointing out the errors in their hypothesis. So I mean, that's what I have. I guess I'm a co-conspirator with you on this. I mean, I can sit back and see that there's holes in the theory, and then they turn around and instead of trying to explain things or give you examples from the real world, they turn around and they start calling you names.
Right. And they also ask us to believe that things in space behave very differently from anything we can see here, like that objects orbit something just because it's bigger. Like, we don't see anything orbiting bigger objects in our daily lives, but they, would have us believe that that's the way our whole universe is set up, by things orbiting. And often they develop these very complex orbits that something would follow. And some of the people, who are pointing, some of the flat Earth people are point out that in order to stay in some of these orbits that they've designed, an object would have to consciously stay in that orbit because it would have to go at different speeds around this, as it turns here, and then, speed up, it slow down, and it wouldn't, there's nothing that would naturally cause it to do that. It would have to deliberately try to stay in the orbit, some of these elliptical orbits and such. So, it's just, the only reason for that is because they want us to believe that the sun is at the center of our solar system, and well, all went from there. And also, you brought up the subject of evolution, and evolution is actually derived also from these same roots of ancient Eastern mysticism. They had from the same root as the idea of reincarnation. There's sort of a history, the history of the idea of evolution goes back to the idea of reincarnation. That's not something I've studied a lot, but I sort of along my studies of this, I came across some of that too.
So yeah, now you said it's available through Amazon and through what are the other other outlets for this book?
Amazon.com and also through Kindle. So,
yeah. Now it's like, and how many pages would this book take up?
Oh, it's very short. It's I think 38 pages total. Oh, one other aspect of my theory that, the interaction of these two waves. Like I mentioned, there are these two stationary waves, and the scalar waves that I was mentioning, the Tesla has scalar waves, which I didn't really say very much about. A scalar wave, it's sort of, it's a kind of electromagnetic wave, and it sort of can go through any object, like any obstacle, like it can go through these two flat Earths as if nothing were there. It's not bounded by time either. It goes backwards and forwards in time. That's kind of different from what we learn in our kind of physics. But Tesla believed in these, it's sort of a fifth dimensional thing. Time is the fourth dimension, but this is fifth dimensional. And it can also affect brain waves too. And I guess I see these waves as kind of a divine thing. I see this as God's way of creation. Something that. So a lot of people who talk about scalar waves would talk about as a very destructive thing that's going to help the elites enslave humanity. But I actually see these waves as some very divine, good kind of energy. but also so there's energy from these scalar waves. I think that's one of the things that creates matter, or gives us life energy. But also these two waves, the way they interact with each other, they the interaction between these two waves, how they cross each other, that creates what's called a Tesla shield. Tesla shield, which is sort of like a series of bubbles, like a shell, like a spherical shell around this whole thing. And I think that on this Tesla shield, on this sort of shell, sort of like an eggshell you could picture that we're on the inside of, that's what the stars are are luminous points of light on these shells, on the shells. And the shell is made up of different layers of there are different layers to this Tesla shield, like a series of concentric bubbles, and maybe some bubbles that are sort of not concentric, but they're part of the shell anyway, and that's what the stars are part of this Tesla shield, and it's sort of impenetrable. It's like a protective layer around everything, and each of these, one of the reasons there has to be these two flat Earths, not just one, but two of them. Each one of these is a resonator. That's one of the things to create scalar waves. You need a transmitter, a receiver, but you also need a resonator. And each one of these flat Earths acts as a resonator for one of the pairs. Like this flat Earth is the resonator for this sun-moon pair, and this flat Earth is a resonator for this sun-moon pair. So there have to be there have to be two flat Earths. Everything's sort of duplicated, but there have to be also the two stationary waves that would cross to create this Tesla shield around the whole thing too. So, I'm if you're interested in any of those terms, it would be good to look up Nikola Tesla's theories of scalar waves. There's a lot written about scalar waves. They're theoretical, though. Like a lot of physicists, mainstream physicists, don't believe that they exist. But Tesla theorized about them, and other people. There's someone, Konstantin Meyl, or Male, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, M-E-Y-L. M as in Mary is the first letter. Meyl or Male. He does a lot of work on scalar waves.
Now, see, Tesla was kind of, let's face it, he was astonishing genius, and he give us the way we get our electricity delivered now. Except for he actually was shooting for too, like a wireless delivery of energy too, and that never materialized. But they're still trying to see if that could work out. That's still doable, I guess. But there's many things about science though that nowadays there's this arrogance and this, especially from these the ardent atheists out there who want to demolish everybody, and they have this arrogance, and they're basically, they go resort again to name calling and ridicule, whereas they like Stephen Hawking though, he said he came to a conclusion about the world, the world would come into existence even whether there wasn't a creator, because there's laws of the laws of nature, laws of the universe. And I have that's problematic in itself to sum it up that way, because the word law, we don't know any law unless
where
there's a
did those
lawmaker.
laws
Right,
come from?
Right.
So
there's a lawmaker or a
yeah,
law.
really.
It's like, so they're actually saying, and another thing is too that they mock people of faith, for example, about believing in a creation and a God who could create the world or whatever. But both the religious explanation, and many of the religions hold very similar views of the creation of the world, and the one of science is basically boils down to both of them argue that there was one event that everything started from. Yet some people, we're always taught that there's always not there's got to be a cause for an action to happen. But both in the faith, in the religious realm as well in science, they want to suspend that criteria in that one instance, so the world can recreate. Like they're just, all, like they say, all the energy we got now going on has always been, it was present at the creation, and they still use the word creation.
Right.
Okay, so it's like I just find problematic. It's like language is very limiting, and they're kind of have to resort back to terms that we've accepted in one context, but they now say, well, now you got to disregard that context in this instance.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, if they're so if they're so creative and so observant, why couldn't they come up with a new way of framing this? I mean, that's another thing. It's like, I mean, Wittgenstein said there's no such thing as philosophical problems. There's mostly everything boils down to language problems.
Right.
Now, I don't totally agree with that, but I mean, I can see there's a great deal of, it's very problematic. Language is a very problematical thing. I mean, especially when you have different languages, not much less just the different variations of English to deal with. Now, when you're talking about scientific language, medical things, they resort to like using Latin, because Latin is largely a dead language. Means it's like we don't even know the true pronunciation of Latin names. How a person speaking Latin at the time of say 2,000 years ago would mean actually they'll speak it. It's a dead language, and so it's not open to change as often as say English or even German or Finnish or whatever, that has influx and ebbs and flows into it. So
Right.
that's the reason why they resort to using those languages. So, but I think your view is interesting. I mean, I admit that I'm no expert in science, but I've also admit that those people a lot of times who claim they are experts in this field or that field, I think there's a large level of self-aggrandizement going on there.
For sure.
And I have issue with that. I mean, I don't think arrogance is something that should be in research. It shouldn't be in trying to explain your idea or your hypothesis to other people.
Yeah, and I don't think scientists are generally deliberately arrogant, and I do think, like I think in my own way I'm trying to be a scientist here, even though it's not my specialty. I didn't major in science or anything. That's one of the reasons I can come up with these goofy ideas, is because I'm not really bound by a lot of the assumptions that most scientists make. But it's good to be searching for the truth, and I know that scientists have to be disciplined. They can't just go flying after every crazy idea that someone thinks of. But on the other hand, science is often too rigid, and very few scientists are probably willing to question some of their most basic assumptions about things. And one thing I forgot to mention, and I didn't draw a picture of this either. The magnetic field I was thinking for these pair of flat Earths would look sort of like if you picture a bagel that's sliced in half, with cream cheese in the middle, and then stacked back together again so that it's has cream cheese in the middle of these two halves. That's the shape of a dual torus. It's a sort of geometrical figure. So the bagel sliced in half is sort of either called a dual torus or a double torus. Torus spelled Torus. It's a shape, and Buckminster Fuller talked about vector equilibrium. That's a lot of his theories were too complicated for me to understand, but some of his the disciples or people who were interested in his theories talked about things more clearly. But vector equilibrium, I think that's where all the forces on an object are equal, and some of later scientists came up with the torus as a shape where that's true, where all the forces on any where any one point are equal, and they talk about torus as a shape that like energy flow, like the energy flow can be self-sustaining within the torus, like it can keep going on forever, and so I picture that the magnetic field of this flat Earth would be, they would have one half of this imaginary bagel, like one half of it would go here, and the other half would be the other flat Earth. So, and if you picture the energy going up through the hole in the bagel and then spreading out over the top, and then maybe coming back through the middle, I'm not describing it well, but there are videos, if you look up dual torus animation on YouTube, you can find some really cool videos, or just anything about torus. You can look up some really cool YouTube videos that'll describe what I'm saying.
Matter of fact, you provided some for this show, and I just couldn't find a way of integrating them.
Okay.
And what I'll do is when I put the links to this, I'll actually put the URLs, the links to those videos that you provided, so people can go look at them. Because another thing is too, it's like it's a problem too. Is like when you use somebody else's video,
Right, yeah.
there might be a claimable copyright infringement. So that was like, it's a good thing just basically to acknowledge that there's and provide those links. But I mean, it is intriguing. This is something that's like I never really considered, and so this is something I got to see. I'm gonna look at those videos more, and see, and then which we just covered, and also get the book, and through my Kindle, and see if I can fully understand this, because I mean, it's what the role that the model. I mean, the model that we're taught in school. There's still a lot of it. I still have a lot of fuzziness there, So I mean, but I think it is intriguing though that you are a person of from music and and that background who is intrigued enough to actually you're putting yourself out there. I mean, you really are, because people are. I mean, I can just. I've dealt with people. I posted stuff on Facebook, for example, and people went ballistic on me just for expressing some of my observations, and so I mean, it's kind of intimidating. I really think that's really kind of almost heroic for you to put yourself out there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I just want to also say that these points of view are, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anyone in my family. Like I have, people in my family who actually, a couple of people in my family actually are scientists, and this doesn't represent their thinking at all. They, probably think it's nuts, but these are just my ideas. And
have you ever discussed your ideas with them?
No, not yet.
And that's like I think that would be kind of hard to handle, because I mean, some people who are your family actually. They can be pretty brutal. I mean, let's face it, look what's said in an argument, a regular argument, who drank the last bit of milk and why did you go get some more? So, I mean, this stuff, and the thing is that visceral reaction, that's an interesting thing though. I mean, scientists or people who have this background in science, they have this visceral response to anybody who maybe doesn't come across with understanding of their understanding of a subject matter, but they also have this this almost like anger. They're listed for anybody who brings up a question that they want to dismiss, but they really can't because it's got to be answered, and they just simply don't know how to answer it. So I mean, it's like, but it seems like even the sciences and stuff like that actually somehow create this emotional response in humans. So I mean,
right.
So I just hope that that not too many people are going to be too on the attack mode for you. But I mean, I think it's like it's an interesting theory to sit back and to kind of ponder. I mean, because you may be right. I mean, I'm like laid back enough and actually admit my ignorance enough to say, okay,
we're all ignorant.
Yeah, I might be wrong about what I was taught, and you might have been wrong about teaching us. So
right, yeah. There's with any of us in anything, there's always the possibility that we could be wrong. I think it's important for any of us to admit that.
Yeah, so, but anyway, the name of the book is Flat Earth Meets Tesla, A Primer Impaired Inverted Worlds Cosmology by Laurel Federbush, and it's available through Amazon.com. And now you see yourself actually enlarging maybe this, and as you do more research, maybe get more reaction and maybe more input. Could you see yourself actually enlarging this book?
Possibly. Yeah, well, the main thing that was hard about the book was just coming up with a darn format to, those. If I don't know if any of you out there, if you've done any of these self-published book things, Amazon actually makes it very easy to self-publish a book. That you can do it for free these days. So I was really, fortunate that they were able to, that I was able to do it that way. I thought that it would be too expensive to self-publish a book, but you can actually do it for free. But it's not so easy to get the right format and everything. That's one thing that's a little bit of a headache. But it's worth doing though. So maybe if I get more things to say about this, maybe I will expand it.
Okay, I definitely encourage you to. As soon as that you come across something else and you want to bring to people's attention, get a hold of us and we'll have you back on. And it's always a pleasure to have you in here, Laurel. And again, also you have a CD too that you came out a while ago.
Yeah, I have like harp. Yeah, I have a harp CD. Yeah, because I'm a professional harpist. This one was a CD of my harp compositions called Tribe Tales. It's some subtitle, but it's basically some compositions for harp that are, original harp compositions based on Jewish biblical stories, I think.
Again, Laura Fetterbush, thank you very much for showing up today, and you brave the cold because it is bitter cold out today here. So anyway, folks, I hope you get a chance to go to Amazon and upload her book here. The book Flat Earth Meets Tesla: A Primary Impaired Inverted Worlds Cosmology. And again, it's an intriguing concept there, an intriguing theory. So
Thank you for having me on your show.